Pick one. This hand? All right.
In the ancient books, it's written that a warrior will draw a burning sword from the fire. And that sword shall be Lightbringer.
Hey guys, and welcome to a new series here on SmokeScreen, the question of the day related to Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire, where I'll take your comments in these videos here and actually pick one or a theme of many and go over a question or whatever of the day so I can put out damn near daily videos. So these videos should be a little bit more short and sweet, a little more compact and shareable and fun. So anyway, recently there's been a lot of stuff on the internet, all over YouTube, etc. about these new pictures coming out. And one particular, there was a shot of Dany and Jon standing there in front of each other like they were about to kiss or whatever, but we don't even know if they were filming anything. Dany looked to have a backwards jacket on, and I don't want to talk about that picture in particular, but the idea of that picture, because a lot of people were saying this is going to be the Nissa Nissa scene where Jon then pulls out his sword and stabs it through Dany's heart. I didn't see any evidence of that whatsoever in that picture. He was just kind of holding her, like embracing her, like they had just kissed or they were about to kiss or whatever. I don't know, but the point being is that this came up in a live stream a couple of weeks ago, and this is going to be the first question of the week, so I apologize I don't have a screenshot, but this was a topic that came up. Does there have to be another Nissa Nissa since we have this story from history? In other words, is Lightbringer a metaphor or an actual literal flaming sword? Alright, and really quickly, just for a little bit of backstory, here is what is said in A Clash of Kings in Davos chapter 1 when he's talking to Salladhor Saan about Nissa Nissa and Stannis being Azor Ahai, etc. That's the context, and here's the basic story. Darkness, lair of the world, and a hero, Azor Ahai, was chosen to fight against it. To fight the darkness, Azor Ahai needed to forge a hero's sword. He labored 30 days and 30 nights until it was done. However, when he went to temper it in water, the sword broke. He was not one to give up easily, so he started over. The second time he took 50 days and 50 nights to make the sword even better than the first. To temper it this time, he captured a lion and drove the sword into its heart, but once more the steel shattered. The third time with a heavy heart, for he knew beforehand what he must do to finish the blade, he worked for 100 days and nights until it was finished. This time he called for his wife, Nissa Nissa, and asked her to bare her breast. He drove the sword into her breast, her soul combining with the steel of the sword, creating Lightbringer, while her cry of anguish and ecstasy left a crack across the face of the moon. So that is the basic story of Nissa Nissa, and some people think, since so many other things in A Song of Ice and Fire repeat as far as history repeating itself, that this needs to happen again, and the short answer to that is no, it doesn't need to happen again. But let's go over a couple things and talk about whether Lightbringer is an actual flaming sword or just a metaphor for a person or a group of people, for that matter, to help save the damn world. So I did another video on this quite a while back as far as talking about Azor Ahai and Lightbringer, where I compared this whole Nissa Nissa story as a kind of a rhyme or a parallel with Rhaegar Targaryen himself. And I will link that video in the description below for more detail, but basically what I was saying was that Rhaegar tried 3 times as well to have 3 heads of the dragon, or the prince that was promised, since he was so driven by prophecy. And a lot of people don't think about his 3 tries, and what I mean by that is he tried 3 times to get 3 different wives, and the 3rd time seemed to be a charm. Now, the first wife was not actually a wife, but it was an attempt to get a Valyrian wife, where Aerys, the Mad King, Dany and Rhaegar's father, sent Steffon Baratheon at the time over to Essos to find a suitable Valyrian wife and bring back to Rhaegar for marriage, although that never happened, and his ship was destroyed in Shipbreaker Bay, and the only person to survive this voyage was, of course, Patchface in the books, so he got no wife and therefore no child out of that first attempt. The second time was, of course, Elia Martell, his long wife, where he did have 2 children, Aegon and Rhaenys, but of course they were both killed, and it seems to be they were killed by a lion, in fact, because the Mountain actually did the deed, where Tywin Lannister actually gave the order. And of course the 3rd time seemed to be the charm, where he met Lyanna Stark and ran off and married her as well. And of course they ended up having Jon Snow as a result of this 3rd attempt. And what really gives me the impression that Jon could be a metaphorical Lightbringer is one of the last lines in that little prophecy there, where it says that her cry of agony and ecstasy went into the blade to keep it hot and made it flame, etc. To me, that sounds like a sexual situation. So technically, if you think about it, Rhaegar did forge his sword in the 3rd attempt, and the result was Jon Snow. And more evidence that this just may be a metaphor is the actual tale of how dragons potentially entered the world in the first place, from the perspective of Dany hearing from Doria and her Dothraki handmaidens, Dany was essentially asking, have dragons been seen in the east? And this is what she hears back from Doria. Once there were 2 moons in the sky, but one wandered too close to the sun and cracked from the heat. 1,000 dragons poured forth, and drank the fire of the sun. That is why dragons breathe flame. One day the other moon will kiss the sun too, and then it will crack and the dragons will return. Now, of course, Dany's Dothraki handmaidens don't agree with that. They say the moon is no egg, that is the goddess, etc. But we do know that after this story was told to Dany, she would eventually go and hatch actual dragons using fire and blood. If you think about the moon reference here, it also leads back to the Nissa Nissa tale, where it said that Nissa Nissa's cry of anguish and ecstasy actually left a crack on the face of the moon. So those 2 things about the crack in the moon being an egg, seem to be a parallel there, or a little connection as far as a metaphorical thing. And of course we know that the second tale is a metaphor for how dragons came into the world. We know that they know nothing about celestial bodies and moons crashing into suns, etc. And so we know that's a tale, so I think you kind of have to attribute those connections there with the moon being involved in both tales, that Nissa Nissa could also be simply a fairy tale or a metaphor. Also, not to mention that Dany and Khal Drogo refer to each other as my sun and stars and the moon of my life respectively. So there you go. I think that leads credence to the idea that the creation of Lightbringer from a sword being plunged into Nissa Nissa's heart is simply a metaphor, because Dany would go on to actually hatch dragons again, and we know there was no damn moon involved, simply fire and blood, and Dany was considered the moon of Khal Drogo's son. Therefore, it seems to be a metaphor connected to the Nissa Nissa story as well. Another quick possibility you've heard me mention before on this channel perhaps is that it could be a little recipe for Valyrian steel. So I think that's possible there. I'm not 100% on that, where it takes dragon fire, some sorcery, and perhaps human sacrifice or blood. So I think that could be an indication as how Valyrian steel was made. So if that's the case, even if they did find out the so-called recipe, for example, if Sam found a book in the Citadel where it says, here's how you make Valyrian steel, people were sacrificed and killed, that's why Jon and Dany and those people would not agree to do that when they already have dragonglass in the first place. And as I've said many times as well on this channel, what could a literal flaming sword do that a Valyrian steel sword can't already do? We know that it already kills White Walkers. We've seen this happen twice now with Jon Snow. We've seen dragonglass as well. So what would a literal flaming sword do that a Valyrian steel sword couldn't do already, unless it shot fucking fiery laser beams? Now, I will say really quickly, there is a possibility that if we believe that the Night King cannot be affected by Valyrian steel or dragonglass, since he actually has a piece of dragonglass in his chest, that does leave open a possibility that you may need some kind of magical sword or weapon to actually kill him, if you believe that Valyrian steel, as it exists now, won't affect him when the time comes to have that showdown. So ultimately, I think that this is more of a metaphorical thing, that people are more likely Lightbringer, as in Jon and Dany. They both kind of fit in their own little storylines, because they do both fit the Azor Ahai prophecy as well. Jon more metaphorical, Dany more literal, since she literally hatched dragons from stone, eggs, etc. So I think this is going to be a metaphor. I don't think there's going to be a literal flaming sword to do anything. So I think it fits into the theme of the story particularly well also, because you're talking about people coming together, working together to save the damn world and bring back the damn dawn. But also really quickly, you guys have been asking to see Riddick a lot more. So what I'm going to do now in these question of the day videos is I'm going to ask Riddick to pick 2, and Riddick's going to give his own little prediction. So let's see what he says. Alright guys, so what I've done for Riddick's prediction here is I have 2 things here, my little Stark notepad. That's his favorite house sigil, obviously, is a direwolf. On one I have the word metaphor, on the other one I have literal sword. So I'm going to put these behind my back and bring them out and let him choose. Alright, here we go. So I'm going to fold these up and roll these up.
You ready to pick? You ready? Pick one. This hand? Alright, okay, let's see what we got.
So he picked metaphor. Alright, so that's Riddick's prediction. He picked metaphor. I tend to agree. I think you're dead on. But we'll follow up after season 8 with all these questions of the day, where Riddick will get a choice 2 and see how good he does. Anyway guys, that's all I have for the day. Again, I will start taking questions from the comments of these videos to do the question of the day video, whether it be simple questions about storylines, side stories, theories, etc. So we can address all these little things during this long night to get us through until Game of Thrones season 8 or The Winds of Winter comes out at some point as well. So anyway guys, let me know what you think. And a huge shout out to my executive Patreon SmokeScreen producers, Lala Gig, Marylin, Bentley, Doc Holliday, Goska, HoonJive, Horton, Erin, Habig, John, Carey, Anastasia, Jason Landers, DTizSmith, MJW, Carole Brown, D Brown, Mike Colton, Lisa Phillips, Alfred Borstmayer, Rob Greene, and Ricky Corotte. I really appreciate it. And to everyone on Patreon, you literally get this channel through the long night. And thank you to everyone on YouTube as well. If you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like and a share. Be sure to subscribe to get everything, and be sure to click that notification bell so you're notified when I drop a new video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Hello.
That's goodbye.